When the palace doors opened, the world expected tradition, restraint, and symbolism. What arrived, instead, was history bending. William and Catherine stepped forward, not as heirs in waiting, but as figures carrying the weight of the crown, their presence charged with authority and finality. Every gesture felt deliberate, every smile loaded with meaning, as power shifted subtly yet unmistakably before the cameras. Royal insiders watched in silence as assumptions collapsed. Was this appearance merely ceremonial, or the clearest signal yet that a new reign had quietly begun? A ceremony meant to reassure the crown. Soft morning light filtered through the stained glass of Westminster Abbey, resting gently on stone that had witnessed centuries of power, promise, and uncertainty. The event was officially framed as a blessing service, but careful observers recognized something far more intentional at play. By early 2025, the palace faced growing pressure to project stability, following months of speculation about King Charles' health, rumors that had trailed him relentlessly since his coronation in May 2023. This gathering was designed to communicate without words. The crown remained steady, and its future was already in place. At the center of that message stood Prince William and Catherine, positioned as the monarchy's next anchors. William's composure verged on the austere, his restless youth replaced by a disciplined stillness honed through decades of expectation. He had learned patience under Queen Elizabeth II and restraint under his father. Now, he carried himself like a man fully conscious of what awaited him. Beside him, Catherine radiated quiet authority. Her return to public life after health challenges in 2024 had transformed her image. She no longer projected gentle reserve alone but also a sense of resolution. Every movement, every detail of her presence communicated reassurance and endurance. Yet behind the polished surface, tension lingered. From Windsor Castle to Buckingham Palace, private conversations about succession had become less theoretical. Officially framed as continuity, the service was meant to quiet those discussions. But symbols carry power, and even silence can speak. As senior officials settled into their seats and ceremonial music echoed through the abbey, attention fell on an empty space. Queen Camilla, expected to enter alongside the king as a sign of unity, had not appeared. The absence was subtle, yet unmistakable. In an institution built on precision, such a deviation carried weight. Camilla's journey from outsider to consort had been long and hard-earned, yet it had also altered family dynamics, particularly with William. Since Queen Elizabeth II's passing in 2022, Camilla had asserted a clearer sense of authority, determined to define her role rather than fade into it. William noticed the disruption immediately, his reaction controlled but telling. Catherine instinctively adjusted, expanding her presence to stabilize the visual balance. To those familiar with palace undercurrents, the empty chair signaled more than delay. It reflected ongoing tensions over influence and visibility within a modernizing monarchy. The abbey remained calm, almost reverent. But the moment revealed what carefully staged ceremonies often conceal. While the crown projected certainty, power continued to be negotiated behind the scenes. What was meant to reassure the public instead exposed how fragile symbolism can be when unity falters, even briefly. When unity quietly fractured, what subtle act inside Westminster Abbey revealed the precariousness of power and ceremony? A ceremony that refused to obey. Snorts, a quiet defiance lingered in the abbey, subtle enough to escape cameras, yet heavy enough to unsettle those attuned to power. The media's focus on William and Catherine had shaped expectations for the day, and the ceremony was meant to confirm a future already embraced by the public. In early spring, beneath arches that had witnessed centuries of order, the monarchy assembled to present unity. Yet unity proved fragile as the bells tolled, their deep resonance rolling through the nave like a warning no one wished to hear. Long before the disruption was visible, it was felt. Advisors had spent months refining every movement, every pause, every breath of the service. The red carpet was more than fabric, it was a boundary, separating roles agreed upon behind closed doors. King Charles stood composed, eyes forward, aware that the moment was meant to elevate his son and daughter-in-law before God and nation. The atmosphere demanded stillness, reverence, and submission to tradition. Then a sharp, unplanned sound echoed from the far end of the abbey. The great wooden doors swung open with force, shattering the illusion of control. Heads turned before permission could be given. A lone figure advanced, determined, unmoved by the ripple of shock across the pews. This was no symbolic entrance scripted in the order of service. It was a declaration. The ceremony slipped from the planned script into uncertainty. Camilla's heels struck the marble too quickly, too loudly, cutting through the fading choir. Ignoring the route prepared for her, she crossed the central path, breaching the invisible line surrounding the Prince and Princess of Wales. Faces stiffened. Clergy hesitated. No one intervened, unprepared for such defiance. As she approached the sanctuary, the air grew taut. William remained unmoving, posture flawless, the discipline of duty holding him in place. Only the tightening of his jaw betrayed the tension beneath. Catherine noticed everything. She sensed the uneven breathing beside her, the subtle effort to reclaim space and attention. When Camilla moved to block the camera's view, Catherine responded with nothing more than a brief, precise glance. It was enough. What followed unsettled even the most experienced observers. As the Archbishop prepared the invocation, Camilla reached toward sacred objects, overstepping a line reserved for the sovereign and heir. Her whispered words to nearby clergy, unseen by the public, had an immediate effect. The rhythm of the service fractured. Silence fell where prayer should have continued. In a place defined by continuity, the moment revealed something raw and unresolved. Beneath the gold, robes, an ancient stone, a struggle unfolded, not over ceremony, but over relevance. By the time the service resumed, everyone understood that something irreversible had occurred. The abbey would endure as it always had, but the balance within the monarchy had shifted quietly, unmistakably, and in full view of history. Could this subtle shift be hiding something deeper? The unnatural stillness inside Westminster Abbey hinted at secrets waiting to surface, the silence that rewrote the crown. The stillness was so complete it felt unnatural, as if time itself had been instructed to pause. Long before anyone fully grasped what was happening, tradition faltered under the weight of the unscripted. Clergy who had spent a lifetime rehearsing ceremony by memory stood frozen, caught between instinct and disbelief. Even the ancient stones, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, seemed to hold their breath as the ritual veered off its carefully planned path. Hidden lenses captured what protocol usually conceals: tightened jaws, startled glances, hands clasped too firmly. Among the assembled royals, confusion spread quietly but visibly. This was more than a disruption, it was a fracture at the heart of a sacred moment. What was intended to signal unity now revealed tension, and one figure, seeking affirmation in the spotlight, had misjudged the rhythm entirely. The harmony demanded by the setting left no room for improvisation. King Charles III saw more than just the pause. He read the room with the sharp awareness of a man who had waited decades for this role. The snorts, fatigue that had once shadowed his public appearances in early 2023 was gone. In its place stood a ruler fully present, alert to consequence. He noticed his son's uncertainty, the quiet composure of his daughter-in-law, and the unmistakable strain in the woman beside him. This moment, heavy and humiliating, was not isolated, it echoed earlier warnings, smaller missteps that had been ignored or forgiven. Silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Wind whispered through the high windows, carrying the faint sounds of the city beyond the abbey walls. Cameras recorded everything, preserving expressions that history would later dissect. This was the kind of pause that forces decisions, the kind leaders either shrink from or step into. When the king moved, it was neither rushed nor theatrical. His shoes struck the stone floor with deliberate certainty as he advanced toward the sanctuary, each step weighted with meaning. The clergy remained frozen, like pieces left behind on a board suddenly changed mid-game. His gaze stayed forward, fixed on the light filtering through stained glass, drawing strength from centuries of continuity even as he prepared to reshape it. The crown he reached for was not the one that dazzles in portraits. It was smaller, symbolic, heavy with promise rather than display. In lifting it, Charles was not correcting a momentary error, he was asserting control over a narrative that threatened to unravel. The disruption meant to secure status had instead justified a long-considered shift, a careful adjustment disguised as ceremony. What followed would be discussed in hushed tones long after the abbey emptied across Britain and far beyond London. In that suspended instant, power quietly changed shape. Tradition survived, but not untouched. And as the ritual resumed, it did so under a new understanding. Even in places ruled by history, authority belongs to those willing to act when silence grows too loud to ignore. When silence spoke louder than words, what shocking moment unfolded beneath Westminster Abbey's arches, where every glint of gold hinted at historic change. Authority had shifted. The precious metal caught the light in a sharp, unforgiving way, reflecting resolve rather than ceremony. Beneath the Abbey's high arches, history moved without announcement. The king's mantle stirred as he advanced with purpose, ignoring the carefully scripted sequence crafted months earlier by aides and officials. What followed was unwritten, yet carried more weight than any rehearsed declaration. King Charles did not wait for instruction or signal. He moved on his own terms. The symbolic crown held firmly in his grasp, the ancient ritual transformed into something intensely personal. In that instant, the ceremony ceased to be about tradition alone, it became a statement of intent. The silence that settled over the abbey was heavy, pressing against the walls as thousands sensed an irreversible shift. William remained still, aware that every movement would echo beyond the moment, a man long prepared for a destiny once distant. Catherine stood beside him, composed but alert, fully grasping the meaning embedded in the king's deliberate approach. This was not theatre. It was recognition granted openly and without apology, confirming her role as a central pillar of the monarchy's future. The king's hand bore the marks of age, yet when the crown was lifted between them, it steadied with surprising strength. That quiet gesture carried the weight of generations. No anthem followed. No voice broke the stillness. The power of the moment came from restraint, from the deliberate absence of spectacle. 3 lives bound by duty and blood intersected in a way that reshaped influence within the royal family. Across the aisle, Camilla stood frozen. The positioning could not be missed. The act unfolded before her, stripping away any illusion of shared command. In that instant, years of careful maneuvering dissolved. The message was clear: authority does not drift or negotiate, it is claimed and confirmed. The air seemed thinner where she stood, the weight of exclusion settling visibly across her expression. What had been framed publicly as reassurance about the monarch's stability transformed into something far greater. Observers would later describe that day as a turning point, a quiet declaration that the future had already been secured. The setting, the timing, even the restraint were deliberate. London had not witnessed such a decisive transfer of moral authority in decades. As the ceremony continued, its original purpose felt distant. William and Catherine stood transformed, carrying a presence requiring no validation. The Abbey, steeped in centuries of coronations and vows, bore witness once more to the monarchy's ability to evolve without breaking. Long after the final prayers faded, one truth remained: the center of gravity had shifted, and the path forward had been unmistakably marked by the king himself. What secrets did his carefully marked path conceal? How would Buckingham Palace's closed gates alter everything behind the royal walls? The day the palace lines were redrawn, the gates closed behind the royal convoy, sealing in more than the echoes of cheering crowds. Inside, a tense stillness settled that ceremony or tradition could not dispel. Only hours earlier at Westminster Abbey, a moment meant to reassure the world in 2023 had fractured something fragile. What unfolded lingered sharply in King Charles's thoughts as he moved through polished corridors into the palace's heart. When he withdrew to his private office, there was no gentle exit from pageantry. The silence that followed was heavy, deliberate, and final. Camilla stood opposite him, still carrying the urgency of the Abbey, but the familiar comfort between them had vanished. What remained was a ruler confronting what he considered a serious breach, not just of protocol, but of trust. To Charles, the incident was not personal drama, it was a public wound inflicted where continuity was meant to be sacred. Rather than raise his voice, the king chose precision. He saw Westminster's events as a threat to the monarchy's image at a time when stability mattered most. Memories of his late mother's careful discipline and music, decades of restraint guided his response. With calm resolve, he reached for schedules mapped months in advance, trooping the color, diplomatic visits, overseas tours, all designed to reinforce unity. One by one, changes were made, names crossed out, roles reassigned, each decision landing with quiet authority. Orders moved swiftly through private secretaries and senior aides. By the end of the afternoon, Camilla's public presence had been sharply reduced. Balcony appearances limited. State receptions adjusted. Her title remained, but the influence attached to it had been curtailed. It was not a public dismissal, but something colder, a controlled distancing, sending a clear message throughout the palace. Elsewhere, William and Catherine were summoned not as observers, but as anchors. The tone shifted when the king addressed his son. Responsibility was no longer theoretical. From that point forward, the Prince and Princess of Wales were tasked with coordinating key royal appearances and public messaging. The future face of the monarchy was being deliberately brought forward, centered on clarity and reassurance. By evening, the palace adapted. Staff quietly updated documents. New schedules circulated. Whispers moved through offices and corridors as long-standing expectations were rewritten in real time. The balance of visibility had changed, and everyone felt it. What the public never saw was the speed of it all, tradition bending without breaking, guided by a king determined to protect the institution above personal loyalty. In a single day, shaped by Westminster Abbey's events and sealed behind Buckingham Palace's walls, the monarchy's internal order was reshaped, not through spectacle, but through firm, unmistakable control. And when the palace settled into that deliberate hush, hidden power moves quietly reshaped the monarchy. When the crown quietly changed hands, the hush that fell over the palace felt deliberate, almost rehearsed, as if the building itself understood something permanent had shifted. After the Westminster Abbey ceremony in early 2024, the monarchy did not descend into chaos. Instead, it moved with calm urgency, like a system quietly correcting its course. Orders flowed smoothly. Doors opened and closed without fuss. Long-standing routines were subtly rewritten. Power was not announced, it was redirected. And its new focus pointed squarely toward Kensington Palace. In the following days, William's offices became unusually active. Documents that previously passed through layers of approval now arrived directly on his desk. Security briefings, diplomatic updates, and media forecasts reached him before dawn. This was no rehearsal for a future role, it was authority in action. William approached his new responsibilities with discipline and precision. Meetings became shorter, decisions sharper, and delays were no longer tolerated. Those around him immediately sensed the change. The waiting period was over. Beside him, Catherine transformed the monarchy's public image. She stepped beyond ceremonial gestures and symbolism, taking an active role in shaping how the institution communicated with the public. Strategy meetings replaced surface-level planning. Every appearance, every movement carried purpose. She offered warmth without softness, simplicity without compromise. At a moment when uncertainty could have undermined confidence, Catherine provided steadiness. Her presence became a quiet reassurance that the crown was secure, human, and relevant. Meanwhile, at Clarence's house, the atmosphere was strikingly different. Camilla's world contracted. Her name appeared less frequently in schedules, and invitations that once seemed automatic were now rare or tightly controlled. By mid-2024, her absence from major state events was no longer subtle, it was understood. Routine gave way to retreat, visibility to isolation. What she lost went far beyond appearances, it was influence, proximity, and the unspoken authority she once held beside the king. King Charles, in contrast, acted with clarity and purpose. Rather than letting personal loyalty cloud judgment, he focused on continuity and safeguarding the crown's future. Observers described his actions as a sacrifice, a deliberate decision to place the institution above sentiment. By quietly empowering his son and daughter-in-law, he stabilized a monarchy that had endured years of internal strain. Public reaction was swift. Polls in London and beyond reflected renewed confidence. A nation weary of public missteps responded to firmness and unity. Media coverage followed suit. Attention shifted from division to functional partnership, Charles as authority, William providing leadership, Catherine shaping connection. Commentators called it a reset, even a revival. Yet nothing was dramatic in the conventional sense. No speeches, no public decrees, no formal declarations of gain or loss. Still, the transformation was unmistakable. By summer, the monarchy operated on a new rhythm. Some figures stepped forward, others receded, and the crown continued, quietly altered, carefully guarded, firmly aligned with a future already unfolding. Behind closed doors, subtle but decisive changes swept through the household. Desks were rearranged, advisors rotated, and familiar faces quietly disappeared from palace corridors. Those who had gravitated toward Camilla's influence were replaced by younger, sharper minds aligned with William and Catherine. It was not announced, debated, or defended, it simply happened, step by calculated step, until a new atmosphere settled over the institution. The moment at Westminster Abbey, meant to project unity, had instead revealed fault lines few could ignore. By late 2023, the ceremony had become more than a public event, it hardened into a reference point whispered about in royal circles. Though the Abbey returned to its familiar stillness, the calm carried weight. It marked acceptance of a new direction, shaped not by tradition alone, but by the assertion of power. Power now expressed itself in the details. Seating plans subtly favored the Prince and Princess of Wales. Speaking orders placed them at the center. Patronages once symbolic were reassigned with intent. Nothing felt rushed. Like a strong current beneath still water, the transition reshaped everything without noise. William and Catherine did not declare authority, they demonstrated it, letting consistency and clarity speak for them. By early 2024, the palace no longer seemed divided. King Charles, once burdened by the strain of balancing affection and duty, appeared lighter, calmer, more assured. The Abbey's decision had resolved an inner struggle. With the future secured, he no longer needed to manage competing loyalties. The crown's symbolic weight had shifted, easing his own. His priority was no longer the length of his reign, but its outcome. Ensuring stability became his quiet triumph. In William, Charles saw more than a son. He saw continuity forged under pressure, someone shaped by moments when the monarchy itself had felt fragile. Their shared understanding, born during periods of internal strain, created a trust deeper than tradition. Catherine's role was equally critical. Her steady presence and disciplined approach reinforced the sense that the future was already taking form. Together, the Waleses represented authority carefully prepared rather than abruptly seized. Their influence extended beyond appearances, guiding decisions aligned with a longer-term vision. Time passed, but the significance of these changes endured. The monarchy did not experience a dramatic upheaval, it underwent a subtle recalibration. Its center of gravity shifted, settling into a structure designed for endurance. Without spectacle or formal declaration, a new command quietly took hold, reshaping the dynasty's path and ensuring that when the next chapter arrived, it would do so with certainty rather than doubt. William and Catherine's confidence commanded attention without words. Authority arrived not with trumpets or proclamations, but through posture, silence, and presence. By the early 2020s, their appearances were no longer symbolic preparation, they carried consequences. Each engagement demonstrated that power was no longer in waiting but operating steadily, openly, and assuredly. Long before Westminster Abbey became the focus of the world, the shift was already underway. William listened more than he spoke, but when he acted, decisions landed with precision. He was not merely supporting the king, he was translating vision into action, shaping a modern monarchy through quiet discipline. Catherine matched that with a different strength. Her influence relied on clarity, not command. She directed initiatives, redefined public expectations, and embodied confidence that required no explanation. Together, they projected unity that felt immovable, not staged. Public trust followed naturally. The monarchy, long accused of drifting, now appeared anchored. In contrast, Camilla gradually faded from relevance. Her visibility diminished and her influence narrowed until Clarence's house felt less like a residence and more like a holding space. Corridors once busy with purpose grew quiet. Any attempts to assert relevance after the Abbey ceremony only deepened the divide, turning ambition into isolation. That ceremony, originally intended to reassure the public amid concerns about the king's health, instead clarified reality. The carefully planned order unraveled, revealing a truth few could deny: power had already shifted. What occurred beneath the Abbey's ancient vaults was not chaos, but correction. Succession ceased being an abstract future and became a present condition. As evening fell, the Abbey remained unchanged in stone but altered in meaning. When King Charles stepped forward with the crown, the moment carried weight beyond ritual. It signaled resolve. His decision was firm, unmistakable, and final. William and Catherine did not seize authority, it was placed upon them publicly and without retreat. Their path from that moment on was no longer conditional. History rarely announces its turning points. Sometimes it allows them to unfold quietly, leaving people to realize only afterward what they had witnessed. By the time the nation understood, the transformation was complete. The crown had not been contested or taken by force. It had simply settled where it belonged, leaving behind past tension and stepping confidently into a future already in motion. So, what do you think this first appearance revealed about power, timing, and the crown's future? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned.